How good was Ray Rice? The Baltimore Ravens have had a lot of success in their short team history spanning just 27 seasons. A lot of great names donned the purple and gold, such as the likes of Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Lamar Jackson. But one name that often gets overlooked is Ray Rice. Rice is usually remembered for his infamous elevator footage, but how good was his play on the field? Let's take a look. Rice was born to parents Calvin Reed and Janet Rice on January 22, 1987. His father was killed in a drive-by shooting when Rice was only a year old. Having no father figure in his life, Ray grew close to his cousin, Myshawn Rice Nichols. Tragedy struck again for a young Rice when his cousin was killed by a drunk driver. Ray was only 10. Fast forward to 2001. This would be his freshman year at New Rochelle High School, where he shined as the star running back. His high school team would only lose one game from 2002 to 2004 with Rice at the helm. In 2003, his junior season, he would lead his team to a state title win over Webster Schroeder with a score of 32-6. Rice would hold a state record for yards in a game with 462 on 42 carries. He went on to attend the University of Rutgers, where he started as a true freshman on Greg Schiano's Scarlet Knights football team. In 2005, Rice's freshman year would turn out to be a success, where the Knights would have their first winning season in 13 years. Rice would rush for 1,120 yards and 5 touchdowns. It was only up from here. The next season, Rice would obliterate his previous totals with 1,794 rush yards and 20 touchdowns. The team would win 11 games that year, tying a school record and winning the Texas Bowl with a score of 37-10 over Kansas State, making it Rutgers' first bowl win in school history as well. Rice would finish with 170 yards and a touchdown in this game and be named MVP. Going into his junior year, expectations were tremendously high for Rice and the Scarlet Knights. He would not only reach expectations, but push the ceiling even higher. He had several 200-yard games. His most notable would be at the International Bowl, where he racked up 280 yards and 4 scores. The team would only go 8-5 this year, but his individual stats were astounding. He finished with 2,012 yards and 24 rushing touchdowns, would place 7th in the Heisman voting, and be a finalist for the Maxwell Award. With an illustrious college career coming to an end, it was time for Rice to declare for the NFL Draft. Ray Rice was drafted in the second round, 55th overall, to the Baltimore Ravens. Willis McGahee would be the starter for Rice's first season in Baltimore, but had a lackluster season, with a few injuries as well. Rice would start Week 9 and have his breakout game, where he would tally 154 yards on 21 carries. Splitting time with McGahee would hinder his output for this season, finishing with 546 rushing yards on 101 attempts and a solid 33 catches for 273 receiving yards. First-year head coach John Harbaugh would see the potential in Rice and name him starter for the 2009 season over veteran Willis McGahee. This would be his breakout season. In the season opener against the Kansas City Chiefs, Rice would total 107 rushing yards on 19 carries, and the Ravens would get the win. In Week 6, Ray would lead the team in both rushing and receiving, racking up 77 rushing yards, 10 catches for 117 yards, and 2 touchdowns in a heartbreaking loss to the Vikings. He was such a valuable running back not only for his ability on the ground, but his receiving skills were elite. On Week 14 against Detroit, Rice had the best game of his career thus far. He had 216 total yards and a score, blowing out the lowly Lions 48-3. Rice would face his biggest obstacle to date when the Ravens faced off against the modern-day Steel Curtain Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers had a streak of 32 games without allowing a 100-yard rusher, but Rice had other plans. With a career-high 30 carries, the former Ravens would tally well over 100 yards. The Ravens would lose a close one 23-20. The team finished the season 9-7, and Ray Rice would be the standout player that year. He ended the season with over 1,300 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, and a healthy 5.3 yards per carry. He would also get selected to the 2010 Pro Bowl. The Ravens would be a wildcard team facing off against the Patriots in Foxborough. On the first play of the game, Rice would bust off an 83-yard touchdown, the second longest run in postseason history. He would gash the Patriots with over 150 yards and 2 touchdowns and give his team the win. They would lose to the Colts in the divisional round. This would mark an exceptional season for Ray Rice, with his trajectory only pointing up. In the 2010 season, Rice would pick up where he left off. A standout performance for him was in Week 15 against New Orleans. He racked up 233 total yards, a career best, and 2 touchdowns, and a win over the Saints. The Ravens were 10-4 at this point and looked like a real contender. The team would finish 12-4 but would not claim the division. The 12-4 Steelers would, since they held the tiebreaker. Baltimore would face the Chiefs in the wildcard round, and Rice would shine yet again. With 99 yards and a touchdown, the Ravens would pummel the Chiefs 30-7. The divisional round matchup would be against the rival Pittsburgh Steelers. The home field advantage would be too much for Rice and the Birds. Rice would deliver a modest 67 yards and a touchdown. Rice still had a great season, posting similar numbers to his last, with 1,220 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and a whopping 63 receptions for 556 yards. Rice did not receive any individual awards this season, but would be voted by his peers 56th on the NFL Top 100 Players list. Rice and the Ravens were looking to take the next step this year. The Steelers had their number, and Baltimore looked poised to punish the rival in 2012. The season opener would have these two teams face off, where Rice would show out. A 35-7 blowout win, Rice would post 107 yards rushing, 2 total touchdowns, and 42 receiving yards. He would also be the only back in the past 3 years to post over 100 yards rushing on the Steelers, and he did it twice. Rice would have several standout performances during the season, but in Week 13, when he gouged the Browns for over 200 yards, 68 of those yards being from one run, you could tell that this was a man on a mission. This game would give him his 3rd consecutive 1,000-yard rushing season. In a Week 17 matchup against the Bengals, a win would secure the division. Rice went absolutely nuts with a massive stat line of 191 rushing yards, including a 70-yard rushing touchdown and a 51-yard touchdown on the game-winning drive. This would win Rice Offensive Player of the Week and give the Ravens their first division title in the John Harbaugh era. Rice would finish with the most scrimmage yards in the league that year, with 2,068 and 1,364 of those being rushing. He also scored on 15 occasions, giving him another Pro Bowl and All-Pro second-team honors. Although the Ravens had great success during the regular season, they would lose in the divisional round to Tom Brady and the Pats. Rice had a mediocre postseason total, just under 150 yards in 2 playoff games. Surely, Rice and the Ravens had a chip on their shoulder for the 2012-2013 season, not having gotten past the divisional round of the playoffs. They knew Ray was a huge piece on their team and were impressed with his production, so they signed him to a 5-year, $35 million extension. They would start the season hot, going 8-2 until they faced a solid Chargers team. The Ravens were down 3 with less than 2 minutes left in the game. Down to their last play, on a 4th and 29, Joe Flacco checked down to Rice, where he made several Chargers defenders miss and just barely got the first down. The Ravens went on to tie with a field goal and eventually won in overtime. This would be a defining moment for Rice's career and a highlight that will never be forgotten. He was named Offensive Player of the Week for his legendary performance. The team would go on to lose the next 4 out of 5, but still clinch their division with a 10-6 record. Rice finished with another 1,000-yard rushing season with 1,143. He had 10 total touchdowns, 61 receptions, and just under 500 receiving yards. Yet another Pro Bowl season for Rice. The Ravens would need some luck in the playoffs, for Rice wasn't as effective as he usually was in the regular season, posting just 300 yards in 4 games. Baltimore would beat the stacked Broncos in the famous Mile High Miracle game and ultimately claim the Lombardi Trophy in 2013. Rice was definitely their best offensive weapon, and they probably wouldn't have won without him. 2013 was a down year for Rice. He was plagued with injuries. He still appeared in 15 games, only averaging 3.1 yards per carry and totaling just 660 rushing yards. He still managed to catch 58 balls, but his receiving numbers were falling as well. Running backs usually don't last very long in the NFL, and it could be argued that Rice was already on the decline. During the 2014 offseason, Rice was arrested on assault charges after an altercation with his fiancée, Jenna Palmer. TMZ released a video of Rice and Palmer on an elevator in an Atlantic City casino where the altercation ensued and Rice struck Palmer where she would fall unconscious. Rice would then be seen dragging her out of the elevator into the hallway. The Ravens stated this was a serious matter and would release Rice. He would never play another down in the NFL again. He was only 27 and could have played several more years. He was a guaranteed 1,000-yard rusher and 500-yard receiver almost every year. How good was Ray Rice actually? I say pretty darn good. Thanks for watching.